It's July 16th, 2013, at 1 p.m. We're sitting with Joan Snyder. Thanks for agreeing to this. It's going to be painless. It'll be fine. All right. Are you from Craig originally?
Yes.
So if you don't mind starting with...
Well, I'll tell you first, my dad grew up here.
Okay.
His dad was a blacksmith here. My maiden name was Beaver, B-E-A-V-E-R. And like I said, there were 11 kids in his family, and his mother died very young, so the 8 of the 11 were still at home, 9 of the 11. And they just kind of raised themselves. My grandfather never remarried, and they just all grew up okay. So I wasn't born here, though. I was born in Vernal,
Utah. Okay.
My dad was a truck driver, and for some reason, like for 3 months, he was working in Vernal.
Oh, okay.
So that's where I was born. But then we came back here, like, I was like 6 weeks old or something when we came back here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I grew up here.
Okay.
And my dad was a truck driver. He was construction too, but he worked for Comet Trucking, and then he worked for American Gilsnite Company. They hauled gilsnite from Bonanza, Utah, to Craig to the railroad. He did that for a number of years, and then he bought a truck line that they hauled livestock to Denver. And it was so much. I used to ride with him in the trucks to Denver. For years, I thought all there was to Denver was the stockyards. That's where we'd go. We'd go to the stockyards, and we'd have lunch there, and then we'd come home.
Wow.
And when we went to Denver, I thought, whoa, there's a whole city here.
Yeah.
When did this happen?
Well, doing all that traveling, I guess let's go back, if you don't mind, first. What was school like?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Oh, fine. I mean, I went to school at Yampa, which most people did, in the one that's the administration building now. And then 5th and 6th grade, we went to Breeze, that isn't there anymore. They tore it down, and then we went to the high school. That 5th, 6th, and junior high were at Breeze. Well, I called it junior high then.
Right.
And then our high school was at what is the middle school now on North Yampa.
Okay.
But school was great. I mean, you know, the classes were small enough, and I do have one kind of crazy story. One of my best friends lived out in the country, and they had a little Mexican burro, and she was a Kinez. I don't know if you're going to interview any Kinezes. There's tons of Kinezes around, but we did a report on Mexican burros, and we asked the teacher if we could bring the burro to school. Well, I'm sure she thought our parents would say, "Are you kidding?" Well, our parents said, "Oh, okay, fine." So my dad went out and got the burro, and we brought the burro to school, and she said, "The only thing is it can't scratch the floors." So we put these booty things on this burro, and we took the burro into school. But it was our show and tell.
Wow.
For our report.
Wow.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know that they would let you do that nowadays.
Probably not, but that's a good story.
Wow.
How many people were in your class, do you remember?
Oh, well, in my graduating class, I think there was 90.
Oh, okay. So not
maybe
too...
89, something like that.
That's not too small compared to other ones.
I think it was like 350 in the whole high school when I was in high school.
Right. 350 students in high school.
Around that number.
What would you do for, like, extracurricular activities?
In high school? Well, you know what? They didn't have girls' sports then.
No girls' sports.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because when my dad's sisters, back in the years that they were in school, they played sports. But they went through a time when they thought girls couldn't do this stuff.
Right.
And I was pretty active and outdoorsy, and I couldn't, it was just crazy. So I was a cheerleader, not by choice, but that was the only thing.
Cheerleading was the only option?
That was the only option for girls.
Huh.
You know, when we played basketball in PE, you could only run half court. If you were on the defense, you could play your half of the court, and then you had to pass the ball off to the offense, and then they would make the baskets. But they thought girls couldn't run.
Really?
I don't know who came up with this. So, and I don't know how many years. By the time Janet was in school, maybe they did have girls' sports, but when I was in high school, they didn't have girls' sports.
Wow.
What years were this?
I graduated in 1962.
Okay.
So, in that, you know, from 58 to 62.
Right.
So it was just crazy.
Huh. Did you do anything outside of school, or?
Oh, yeah. But, like, you know, I was listening to Terry. We just made our own entertainment. Where the swimming pool is now was a skating rink.
Oh.
And when we were kids. And there were also, in the park, there were some trampolines that they had put in the ground. There were like 6 of them.
Oh, really? And,
oh, my gosh, it's a wonder we didn't end up with broken bones. Because we lived on Rose Street, which is just right across the alley from the park. we were at the park all the time, skating, and my brother played tennis a lot, so he was at the tennis courts. And, but, you know, it was a small town then.
Right.
You know, 3,500 people or whatever, and
Right.
you could just, our parents didn't worry so much about us. We went everywhere by ourselves. You know, we'd go play on the sand rocks, and as long as you were home for dinner,
Yeah.
you know, it was all good.
Wow. Trampolines in the ground.
Yeah, they weren't very big. They were probably twice as big as this table, but there were 6 of them, and they were just ground level, you know, just in the ground,
Huh.
so you wouldn't fall off,
Yeah.
Right.
but you could bounce off.
Right. Right. Right off.
Right off. I don't know how many years those were there, but I remember playing on them when we were young. Because we didn't have TV. I think I was a junior in high school maybe before TV came to Craig.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't grow up being used to sitting in front of a TV.
Right.
You know, we were always out doing stuff.
Right.
Sometimes not the best, but you know, we were kids.
Did you ever do the dragging mane?
Yeah, some.
Some.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, we had a car that had been my grandparents. You'll find this funny. My mom's maiden name was Fish. So my mom married the beaver.
Yeah.
She was a fish, but
Yeah.
my grandma and grandpa Fish had this car,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandpa had died and my grandma never drove, so my sister and I inherited this car. Well, it would go without pushing on the gas pedal, so we would go just really, really slow without pushing on the gas pedal.
Right.
So we didn't, we just went really slowly.
Yeah.
And there was a man named Major Lawrence who lived down the street here. He lived at about a block or 2 blocks down. Never looked. And so when we learned to drive, that was the one thing we were told. You have to watch out for Major Lawrence because Major Lawrence will never look out for you.
Wow.
So we had to always watch for Major Lawrence if he was coming out of his driveway or driving, because you all knew who everybody was by their cars.
Right.
You know.
Huh.
But I worked when I was in high school at the Tasty Freeze was a drive-in. I was car hop.
Okay.
And it was right across from the courthouse. Dr. Voigt's dentist office is there now, but when I was in high school, it was the Tasty Freeze, and I worked there.
Right.
And then after I worked at the Palace Drug Store, which was down on the corner of that was the only stoplight in town at that time, was the one on Victory and Yampa.
Oh.
And that was the only stoplight in town, and I worked at the Palace Drug as a soda jerk. I went from being a car hop to a soda jerk.
Right. Oh.
But I got married really young, and my husband went to 1 year of college at Mesa State, and then we came back here. He worked at the dairy. In fact, him and Terry had worked together at one time.
Oh, okay.
But then we bought a ranch, and we were on the ranch for probably, I don't know, we probably had it 25 years or something. We had 4 kids, and 3 of our 4 kids grew up pretty much out there
Right.
on the ranch.
What was it like raising a family here in Craig?
Oh, it was wonderful. Well, even growing up here was wonderful. And, you know, my kids, our oldest son graduated in 80, so that was right during the boom, you know, and it was a little bit harder on those kids because there were so many kids coming and going and coming and going. They had a chart up at the high school at one time that of all the kids that moved into Craig and all the kids that moved out of Craig during the school year, it was almost the same number.
Oh.
So, you know, they'd be here for 2 or 3 months and then they'd leave. Well, the teachers, to try to teach, you know, classes with kids coming and going like that, it was, but my kids were all pretty active in school and 4-H.
Oh, right.
Which I was too, but, and my husband grew up in Maybell, which is 30 miles west of here. It's a little tiny ranching community.
Right.
So he had ranching in his background. I just had the livestock hauling in my background.
Yeah. So that's what you guys kind of took to.
Yeah.
What type of livestock?
We had cows.
Cows.
Yeah, we ran cows. And we did wheat a couple of years, but it was dry land, and it was dry.
Oh.
You know, some years you got good moisture, and some years you didn't.
Right.
But we had it for a long time, and then we sold that and moved to town, and our youngest son then, I think he probably was 12 when we moved into town. So his junior high and high school years were in town.
Oh, okay.
But,
So what year would that have been when you moved back to town?
well, what year did we sell the ranch?
Or around what year?
19... Must have been 88, 89,
Okay.
around that.
Oh, so a while after
Yeah.
after the boom and everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
because, so, you know, as how the boom affected Craig, I wasn't in town,
Right.
you know,
Right.
that much. But I went to work when our youngest son started school.
Mhm.
They had just built Ridgeview Elementary out west of town. And I
Oh,
went
was
to
that a
work-
new school?
It was most years. It's the newest. Well,
Oh.
Sandrock is, but that was a 5. It's changed. But
Right.
Ridgeview is the newest building we had.
Okay.
And I went to work there when Jody started first grade. And I worked there for about 15 years as a teacher's aide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of the changes in behavior of kids and,
Right.
you know, just family structure.
Like what?
Well, just the family structure, you know, more single parents.
Mhm.
It's harder when the kids don't have parents that can both be there, because if you're from a single parent household, generally the parent is working and,
Right.
you know, the behavior just kind of has gone downhill a little bit. And I don't know how it is now because I haven't been in the school system for a while, but I think when I started it was much more, well, I think teachers had a little more control.
Mhm.
Now I think it's gotten to the point where it's so hard to discipline.
Oh,
So,
right.
you know, and a lot of teachers do really well anyway. I'm not saying they don't. It's just a little more challenging
Right.
to do that.
Right.
But then we built a little miniature golf course out west of town.
Oh, there's mini golf?
No,
Oh.
it's gone.
Oh.
But it was right across from the KOA campground,
Okay.
and we ran it for, I don't know how long we had that.
Oh,
Probably
you
10.
guys built it
Yeah,
yourselves?
we built it. Well, my husband was, after we sold the ranch, he did construction.
Oh,
Yeah, we
okay.
built it ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we planned it and built it, and we had it for quite a number of years, but I was getting to the point, it was a lot of work.
Mhm.
We had a soda fountain in it.
Mm.
So I said I was a soda jerk in the 60s, and now it's in the 90s, and I'm
Yeah.
still a soda jerk.
Yeah.
You know. But we had a soda fountain, which was about half of our, you know, income off of the golf course,
Mhm.
because we made all the old-fashioned stuff, banana splits, you know,
Right.
malt shakes, all that stuff. But,
Right.
it was a good thing. I'm glad we did it, but like that one book, Passages, you know, these things are good for you, but it's time to move on.
Oh, okay.
And we sold it thinking that it would probably always be here, and it wasn't 2 years until it was just totally,
They just didn't do it?
they didn't do anything with it, so that was kind of discouraging.
Yeah.
But the one thing I really didn't like when the boom came was that they put the one-way street in. I have hated that one-way street ever since it put in. I still hate it.
How did it affect you guys?
Well, it's just annoying.
Yeah.
You know, for one thing, I think that's what killed the downtown in Craig. When I was a kid, there were stores. I mean, there were just stores everywhere.
Mm.
You know, there were dress shops. There were, well, J.C. Penney's was down on the other end. Golden Rule was a clothing store. Betty's shop sold dresses. Marge Marr sold really nice clothes. There was a shoe shop, 2 or 3 shoe shops. Birdie's tot shop was for little kids. The hardware store was down here. 3 drug stores. The Palace that I worked at, and then there was Craig Drug and Cowan's Drug. When I was a little kid, Safeway was across the street here. And then that became Hested's, and Ben Franklin was down the street. So there was just all these shops, and when they put that one-way street in, people going through town, they didn't come to the downtown anymore. And I
Right.
really do think that was part of the demise of the down. I mean, I know things change,
Right. No, that's a
But-
good explanation, though.
but I just think that was part of the reason that downtown Craig just, I mean, there's no shops here now. I mean,
Right.
a couple of little gift stores, but it's in shops. You know, there just aren't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not... No, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people see that Walmart and Kmart were kind of the demise of...
Yeah, but Walmart
it.
and Kmart didn't come until
Businesses.
years later.
Right.
I mean, my goodness, years later.
So these businesses here on Yampa and
Uh-huh.
Victory, they really started to kind of fall out
I think
before.
before Walmart.
Walmart.
Oh, well, Walmart's only been there, what, 4 years?
I'm not
It's-
sure.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's very new. Now, Kmart's been there a long time, but not that new. You
Mm.
know, the downtown was pretty much dying before that happened.
Wow.
It just, but that's always been my opinion, is
Mhm.
that one-way street it killed the downtown area.
Right.
You know, and my brother, who grew up here, he moved to California. Well, my dad had arthritis really bad, and they moved to California in the early 60s, and my brother was a senior in high school. Only the high school he went to had more kids than the town of Craig had people.
Oh, wow.
He just hated it.
Wow.
Well, it was overwhelming.
Right.
So he came back and stayed with us and finished his high school here. But, you know, when he was gone for a number of years, and when he came back, he said, I wouldn't even know there was a downtown. When you're going on the, you know, going east, he said, if I was a tourist, I wouldn't even know there was a downtown.
Yeah, because you have to bypass it, kind of.
You do to get there. So I've never liked that one-way street. In fact, there was a committee that we tried to get the one-way street taken out, but the state highway told them, now this is just always what I've heard, that when they, because that's a state highway, when they changed it, the state highway said, we don't think this is a good idea, but once we put this in, we're not taking it back out, because they had to change the bridge at the park. And that they said, you know, once we put this in, it's here to stay. Now, whether that's a true story or not, who knows?
I see. That's what they're saying, though. Yeah.
But when I was a kid, you know, the big building down on the corner on this side of the street, it's like a sandstone building. That was the bank. That was the Moffat County State Bank when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Where Moffat County State Bank, well, it's not that now, it's Bank of the West.
Right.
That was our church. The Congregational Church was there when I was a kid.
And now that has changed all the way over to Yampa?
The Congregational
Yampa
Church?
Bank?
Oh, no, it's the Bank of the West. The Moffat County State Bank sold.
Oh, okay.
It sold, I don't know, it was First Community, and now it's Bank of the West. But but like I said, when I was a kid, that was where our church was, right there.
Wow.
In Parsonage.
A lot of changes then.
Yeah, and the pastor that we had when I was a little kid, his name was Reverend Best. He was from England, and he was just the sweetest little old man. And I remember I was really small, but I remember he always had candy in his pocket, so we always thought he was wonderful.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why J.C. Penney left?
Well, they moved, you know, when they first built the mall, J.C. Penney moved out to the mall.
Where Safeway is now?
Yeah,
Okay.
in that mall.
Right.
I was talking to one of the ladies one time, and she said part of the problem at J.C. Penney at that time was they didn't have any control over what they got, what merchandise they got. And she said, you know, we sell work pants, we sell work shirts. That's what our majority of what we sell is, and they quit sending them to them. Because somebody somewhere else was making the decisions on what merchandise went to what stores.
So
and that's what one of the gals that worked there told me.
You weren't getting anything that people here would
want to buy.
That's strange.
But when JCC Penney was down here, it was so funny. It was a two-story building. And they didn't have cash registers down. They had, like they do at the banks now, where you put your money in the little thing, and it would shoot up through a tube up to the bookkeeper, and then she would make your change and shoot it back down to you.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
And you know, that was when I was really small. I don't know what year they quit doing that, but.
Wow. Now, you said you don't know exactly, you know, you couldn't really speak too much about the boom and the change of things, but did you notice any changes at all when you came back into the city?
Oh, yeah. You know,
How
it's a grocery
was it
store.
different?
And like Terry said, the modular set up schools, you know, because when my kids, when they went to the high school, and at that time the Yampa building was closed, the one where the administration building is now, but they had part of their classes at the Yampa building, and it's only a block.
Right.
You know, but they would have to walk that block between, because the math classes or something was at the Yampa building.
So they have, walk in the middle of the school day?
Yeah, it was just like changing classes, only they changed buildings.
Yeah.
They went to the Yampa building for
Changed
some
a
of their
block down.
classes. Yeah.
Huh.
Because they didn't have enough room in the high school for them.
Because there were so many people.
Yeah. But then they built a new high school up on the hill.
Oh, sorry. I was like, is there a picture I've never noticed?
You know, up down the hill.
Yeah.
And Jeff graduated in 80 and Melanie in 81, and Melanie was the last class to graduate from the old high school.
Oh, okay.
And then
they
moved
built
up to the new high school.
The new one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How had the people changed in Craig?
Well, you know, during the boom, I think a lot of people came that, and some of them stayed. But Craig is isolated, and you have to want to be here. You know, I love it here. But then I grew up here, and I don't mind the isolation. You know, it's hard to get anywhere if you have to go anywhere quick.
Right.
But nowadays it's easier because you just drive anyway. But you know, I can remember I was taking ceramics at that time, and some of the ladies that came, all they did was complain about Craig. And I used to think, well, just leave, you know, because you could tell they didn't want to be here. And
wow.
But that's just the way it was. And, you know, and I do think, of course, not, you know, being out in the country, we weren't as involved, but I think the crime did go up and that kind of stuff, just because of the transient type of people that were
People just coming in and out, leaving.
Yeah, and leaving.
Right.
You know, when you don't have an ownership in something.
Yeah.
You know, we even found that out at the golf course. The kids from Craig, of course, we knew their parents. You know, if we didn't know them, the kids that worked for us knew them.
Right.
But we hardly had any problems with the kids from Craig, but like the traveling baseball teams and rodeo teams and stuff, they would come out, and those were the kids we had problems with because they didn't have any ownership in it. You know, it meant nothing to them if they'd break one of the signs or you know. And I think the kids that were here, they just didn't feel that way.
Huh.
You know, but I had worked at school for so many years that I knew a lot of those kids too.
Right.
And that makes a difference if you have a relationship with them.
Right. If you know them.
Yeah,
a little
for
bit.
sure.
All right.
But we do go to Grand Junction now. My husband just doesn't like the winters here. I wouldn't mind staying here year round, but he's always had to work out in them. He had to feed in the winter cows and putting up hay, and well, I helped him, but still he was his major thing. And then when he did construction, you know, he always had to be out. He just doesn't like the cold.
Really? Well, I've heard that it's pretty cold here during the winter.
Well, we used to go to Maybell for dances. Well, in Maybell, they have the dances in the school, and you can't drink in the school.
Oh.
So if you want to drink, you have to go outside. Well, that one year it was like 50 below zero at New Year's. That was the most sober dance we were.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We came home to our house, and it was only like 30 below. We thought, wow, this is
only 30 below.
This is like way warmer.
Wow.
Well, when I was working at school, I was on some of the committees, and the superintendent, I told you this, I was on one of the committees with the superintendent, and some of the new people in town were just complaining because they wouldn't close the schools when it got 20 below. And he said, if we closed the schools at 20 below, we'd close half the winter.
Wow.
You know, you just have to learn to dress for it and deal with it.
That's cold.
And when I was working at Ridgeview, we had a principal that said, you know, if kids are going to live here, they've got to learn to deal with it. And if it was 0 or above, they went outside for recess. Now, if it was below 0, they got to stay inside. For
0 and above.
Yeah. They would
go to
out,
recess.
Yeah. They would go outside for recess. The kids didn't mind it. They're all running around, but us people that were on duty were going, oh my gosh, it's cold out here.
Gotta run with them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I don't think they do that anymore. I think things have changed. I don't think they make the kids go out when it's that cold. But when I worked there, they did.
Wow. We have the opposite. Growing up in the desert, you know, especially if you had PE in high school in the summer, you always wanted it in the morning, because if you had PE 6th period, I mean, it could be upwards and into the 120s.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I don't know what the cutoff was for running a mile, but I feel like I really can remember running a mile in 110 degrees.
Oh my gosh. And that can't be helped. That would be as bad as running it when it's 0.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's just a different extreme.
Right, for sure.
That's
well,
crazy.
Maybell has one of the records of, when I used to work in first grade, we'd do the weekly reader. Do you remember those from when you were kids, the weekly reader?
Yeah.
And they had a thing on weather, and Maybell is one of the top 5 for the coldest places in the United States, coldest recorded.
Oh my God.
I think it was 53 below or something like that, 50
Oh, that's
something.
right.
That.
Yeah, the Maybell does have the coldest.
Yeah.
At least the coldest in the state, for sure.
in the state.
And then one of the coldest in the
one of the coldest. It was in the top 5. But the only time they ever closed school was when it was below 50 below, because, and they really weren't going to close it, but Steamboat needed the gas for their ski area to keep all their stuff warm, and they just couldn't pump that much, natural gas to heat everything. And they did close school that one day.
So that they could.
But back in those years, they didn't have radios on those buses, and that was dangerous having those kids, because some of our kids, they commute my husband rode 35 miles to school when he was in high school.
35 miles?
Yeah, one way. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, some of those kids live way, way out. Because
right.
Craig's the only high school in the county. That's why it's called Moffat County High School.
That's the only high school in the county?
In the county, yeah.
So all the kids from
everywhere. I mean, there are only 2 other towns in the county.
Oh, okay.
Moffat County is the second biggest county in Colorado, but we're one of the least populated. But Dinosaur kids go to Rangeley to high school because it's too far. But like the Maybelle kids, Browns Park is an area that goes clear to Utah. And some of those kids come from Browns Park. They come to Maybelle, and they would get on the Maybelle bus and then ride into town. They'd go 50 miles one way to school.
Every day?
Every day. And back.
That still continue?
They still have an elementary school in Maybelle, but it only goes up through, I think it's 4th grade now. It used to go, when my husband was down there, it went through 8th. Okay.
So there are kids living in Dinosaur now that have to...
Well, they go to Rangeley.
Well, they go to Rangeley.
Yeah, they go to Rangeley.
Browns is what I meant to say.
Oh, Browns Park. Yeah, there are a few that live in Browns Park that come to... Well, the elementary kids come to Maybelle for school. But a lot of those kids that live that far out, they would board in town, or their parents would buy a house and one of them would stay in town.
Oh, okay.
So the kids could go to high school.
That makes
But even down south, it's 35 miles to the Moffat County Rio Blanco border. So those kids ride 35 miles, and it's almost 40 to Bags, so to Wyoming. So it's a big county. There's a lot of distance for kids to come to school.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Never complain about your commute.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
My 15-minute commute.
Yeah.
Driving my car.
Yeah, right.
To work.
And not riding a bus for 35 miles,
Yeah.
But it's just the way it is when you live in a more rural area, And in this part of the country, how far towns are apart. We have one of the gals I used to work with at the school. She came from back east, and that was the thing. She just couldn't get over it because there are towns back there every 8-10 miles.
Yeah.
And she said,
living in LA.
Yeah.
It's all one town.
Yeah, it's all one town. Yeah. But she said she just couldn't get over how far you had to go from one town to another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we used to go to Grand Junction every once in a while. It was a big trip for us, but we would go to Grand Junction to do, I don't know, special things. My mom made most of our clothes when we were kids, just because that's, she made my sisters and mine.
Right.
Not my brothers so much. But she always made, like, our prom dresses and, all that stuff. She just did. Well, for one thing, we didn't have the money to buy.
No, I mean, that's awesome, though. She made all that.
Yeah, she did. It was just something we did. But once in a while, we'd go to Grand Junction for trips. But when Jeff, our oldest son, was in high school, and he played football and wrestled, and Grand Junction was the nearest team that we played, because during the boom, that put us, they put you in your division by the amount of kids in your school, and that put us over the amount. We were in the same league as Grand Junction. Grand Junction's big. I mean, their high schools are huge. And the first time we went down to play them, I'll never forget this. Our kids thought they were pretty good.
Yeah.
Our football players. And we went down there, and those Grand Junction kids ran out on the field, and we thought, oh my gosh, they've opened the jail.
Yeah.
We're thinking, oh, and they just screamed. It was an awful culture shock.
Yeah.
Our kids and our boys thought they were pretty tough, but I know they really weren't.
Aww. Well, you went to high school the year that the football team made it to state, didn't you?
No, that was Jan's year.
That was Jan's year.
Yeah.
That was Jan's year. Okay.
No, I don't think they ever made it one year when my dad was in high school, though. He was, it was my uncle. My dad wasn't there. Back in the 20s, they were never scored on all season.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's a record that's ever been beat.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. My dad graduated, this is another funny story. My dad loved to play football. And my grandma had died, and I'm sure he had to go to work to help out the family. Well, he would only go to school the first semester, and then he would quit and work, but he wanted to play football, so he would go that first semester. He was 21 when he graduated. I think they finally said, no, you can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
You've got to graduate. So he was 21 when he graduated.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he played football for
all those years. He went back to school. Oh, probably 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
Can you imagine a 21-year-old playing against a 14-year-old kid? You
No.
know? So he couldn't. And one of my uncles, the youngest of the family, because my dad graduated in 32, but my youngest uncle was in the 40s. He was in high school. And him and 2 other kids went hunting and didn't go to football practice. Well, the coach wouldn't let them play in the next game, so they all quit and joined the service. This was during World War II.
Oh, my goodness.
I thought, boy, that showed that coach, didn't it?
Wouldn't let them play football, so they
just
joined the
the Navy.
service.
Yep, they all 3 of them.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Isn't that funny? Those beavers, they were something, I'll tell you.
Wow. That's a good story. If we can switch topics completely, how long have you been volunteering here at the museum?
Oh, I don't know, 5, 6 years?
5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
How have you seen it develop in that time?
Well, they do so many different things all the time. Jan and Dan are excellent. I mean, their minds. Well, Jan's related to everybody in the country.
Right.
And Dan just can remember everything. So they just, and the changing exhibits they do, oh my gosh, they're just awesome.
Right.
The Norman Rockwell thing that they had come here, that doesn't usually get to go to museums this size. That was here last year. That was just great. And I just love working here, but I get to meet a lot of people. And before I started doing, now I do obituaries. They have everybody that's been here any time at all has a family file, and I scan the obituaries into the computer. But before I started doing that, I was going through old newspapers and copying out birth records or death, or if I found an interesting article about somebody, I would just copy it and put it in their file.
Yeah.
Because it's fun to come look through your files and see what's there.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But now that we go to Grand Junction in the winter, I only do this, when I come back in the summer.
Yeah. This building just, is fascinating for all the different things it's been used.
Well, my dad can remember the swimming pool being here in the basement. He remembers that.
Wow.
They had that. And I don't know that it had the floor that opened. It seems like he said they did. Like in that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, how that floor opened.
Oh, right.
The swimming pool was there.
Right.
It seemed like that's what Daddy said. But you'd have to ask Jan or Dan about that, because I'm not sure about that floor opening.
I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if it does.
I'm not sure about that or not. But when I was a kid, this was an armory. We came to a lot of dances here. And then after that, they used it for a lot of different things. Pickleball, have you ever?
Yeah,
it's kind of
that was just explained to us.
They used to play pickleball here a lot.
Dave Griffith did.
Oh, okay.
I guess he and his wife won one year,
Did
won
they?
the tournament.
Well, my husband and a friend of ours, they probably played against them.
Oh, yeah.
They really got into it.
Pickleball.
Yeah,
Was that a long-term thing?
No, they didn't. It didn't seem like it lasted real long.
Oh, okay.
Maybe 3 or 4 years, 5 years, I don't know.
Pickleball.
Yeah,
We
pickleball.
should bring it back.
Yeah, they should.
It was fun. You played it with a wiffle ball, wiffle ball, and it's paddles like we still got our pickleball paddles.
Really?
They're like ping pong paddles, only bigger.
Right.
When you play it, it's kind of a cross between tennis and ping pong. Yeah.
That's exactly how Dave described it.
Oh, was that how he described it also? Yeah.
It's an interesting game.
Yeah.
Just kind of to close, is there anything in general you just want to add? Any stories you think are really important? You tell really good stories.
Oh,
you got to give yourself some more credit. Yeah.
Not that I can think of.
Think of?
The things I do now, I do a lot of quilting now. And the group I quilt with here in town, they give quilts to, the seniors that live at the senior apartments, all of them get a quilt at Christmas.
Okay.
And then any other senior that requests one, and they give them to like the police department or the fire department, so if they need them, you know, for if kids or families are taken out of home.
Right.
And the group I go to in Grand Junction, they give all theirs to cancer patients.
Oh, okay.
In fact, they send them everywhere. The lady that's in charge of that, she told me at one of the meetings last winter that she had sent 1,580 quilts out
Oh, my goodness.
to different people. Like if you would have a relative in California, all she asks for is the postage, that you pay for the postage.
Wow.
So, and I really enjoy quilting, so that's what I do a lot of.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's something I do, but that's it.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.